by a measured amount of mechanical work.
Joule's work mattered because it was the first time that anyone had convincingly measured the exchange rate between movement and heat. He'd proved the existence of something that converts between heat and motion. That something was going to be called energy. And it's for that reason that the basic unit of energy in the new international system of units is named after him, the joule.
Joule and Carnot's ideas were combined by Thomson to produce what would later be known as the laws of thermodynamics. The first law, from Joule's work, states that energy can be converted from one form to another, but can never be created or destroyed. The second law, from Carnot's theory, states that heat flows in one direction only, from hot to cold. In the second half of the 19th century, this new understanding paved the way for steam power to artificially produce ice. Ice-making machines like this one were based on principles discovered by Michael Faraday, who showed when ammonia changes from a liquid to a gas, it absorbs heat from its surroundings. It's part of what is now known as a refrigeration cycle. In the first stage of this cycle, gigantic pistons compress ammonia gas into a hot liquid. The hot liquefied ammonia is pumped into condenser coils, where it's cooled and fed into pipes beneath giant water tanks. Then the pressure is released, and the liquid ammonia evaporates, absorbing heat from the surrounding water. Gradually, the tanks of water become blocks of ice. By the 1880s, many towns across America had ice plants like this one, which could produce 150 tons of ice a day. For the first time, artificially produced ice was threatening the natural ice trade created by Frederick Tudor. America's appetite for ice was insatiable. Slaughterhouses, breweries, and food warehouses all needed ice. Animals were disassembled on production lines in Chicago, and the meat was loaded into ice-cooled boxcars to be shipped by railroad.
Livestock on its way to the great meat-packing centers of the nation, to markets everywhere. Food of every sort, safely and quickly delivered in refrigerator cars.
As fruit and vegetables became available out of season, urban diets improved, making city dwellers the best-fed people in the world. And to keep everything fresh at home, the Iceman made his weekly delivery to recharge the refrigerator.
Refrigeration makes a tremendous difference in people's lives. First of all, in the diet, what is possible for them to eat. They can go to the store once a week. They don't have to go every day. They can obtain at that store foods that are from almost anywhere in the world that have been transported and kept cool, and then they can keep them in their own home.
Eventually, the Iceman disappeared as more and more households bought electric refrigerators. These used the same basic principles as the old ice-making machines. Liquid ammonia circulating in pipes evaporates, draining the heat away from the food inside. Compressed by an electric pump, the gas is condensed back into liquid ammonia, and the cycle begins again.
The electric power companies loved refrigerators because they ran all day and all night. They may not have used that much power for each hour, but they continued to use that. So one of the ways that they sold rural electrification was the possibility of having your own refrigerator.
In the early days, the freezer was used to freeze water, nothing else. Freezing was seen as having the same damaging effects as frost. The man who would change this idea forever was a scientist and explorer named Clarence Birdseye. In 1912, Birdseye set off on an expedition to Labrador, and the temperature dropped to 40 degrees below freezing. The Inuit had taught Birdseye how to ice fish by cutting a hole in the ice several feet thick. When he caught a fish, he found it froze almost as soon as it hit the air. This process seemed to preserve the fish in a unique way.
When you went to cook this fish, it tasted just as good as fresh. And he couldn't figure that out because when he froze fish at home, they would taste terrible. So when he got back home, he finally tried to figure out what was the difference between this quick freezing and the usual freezing.
Under closer examination, he could see what was happening to the fish cells. With slow freezing, large ice crystals formed, which distorted and ruptured the cells. When thawed, the tissue collapsed and all the nutrients and flavor washed away. The so-called mushy strawberry syndrome. But with fast freezing, only tiny ice crystals were formed inside the cells, and these caused little damage. It was all down to the speed of the freezing process. A simple concept, but it took Clarence Birdseye another 10 years to perfect a commercial fast freezing technique that would mimic the natural process he'd experienced in Labrador. In 1924, he opened a flash freezing plant in Gloucester, Massachusetts, that froze freshly landed fish at minus 45 degrees.
He then extended that to all sorts of other kinds of meats and produce and vegetables, and almost single-handedly invented the frozen food industry.
Refrigerators and freezers would eventually become icons of modern living. But there was a less visible cold transformation happening at the same time. This would also have a huge impact on urban life. The cooling of the air itself. 3 centuries had passed since Cornelius Drebbel had shaken King James in Westminster. Now, at the dawn of the 20th century, air cooling was about to shake the world.
Tell me, what is the lowdown on this air conditioning thing?
Now you've started something by asking me that.